gang. Let's cut into one of these, shall we? This is an Epiphone Sorrento from 1963. It's an E452T. The T stands for thin. In my case, T stands for thick, but to each their own. These were available from 1960 to 1969, which makes them ultra groovy and far out. Remember, these were made in the same factory by the same people on the same machines using the same skills as Gibson. It's essentially an ES-125 in all but name and headstock shape, and the fact that they have a mini bucker rather than a P90, which some people might consider an upgrade. Such a distinctive color. It's a green burst, and it's all the way around, you know. This isn't a case of complete fading or something. It was intentional. This is a color known as Royal Olive. Very evocative, kind of catchy. This one has the smaller, more Gibson-like headstock. The last year for that, in 1964, they got elongated. These were produced in not huge numbers. 199 total of this model in 1963 with the single pickup. Only 96 made with two pickups. And that's what we're doing. We're converting this into a dual pickup model. Heavens no. Won't somebody think of the children? The children don't care. They laugh at you behind your back. The other thing we're going to do is make a new bridge. The owner likes wood-topped or wood-saddled bridges. And this one, to be honest, the ABR, it's barely functional if you like your action on the higher side. But for low action, we'd need to get into a neck reset. Yes, it can be done. It's not unlike a standard acoustic dovetail in there, except when it isn't. We had that ES-125 or 225, can't remember, a few years ago, with the bizarre heel joint that had that weird transverse tenon in it, as well as a dovetail, which made it impossible to take apart. Anyway, we don't have to worry about this time, because we have other options. It's got a set of these mini buckers to go in there. I believe these are from a Collings. Yes, from 2014. So we might as well do a whole new harness while we're at it, because it's all going to have to come out anyway. There are people who clamor after the original electronics out of these because, well, they're the same thing as you'd find in a Gibson, the same era, right? So people doing meticulous numbers matching restoration. The owner is not that guy. I think one of the most distinctive things about these guitars that I really like are the oval-shaped inlays on the fretboard, the perloid. That's fun. Just for record-keeping purposes, action on this to begin with is 7.5 64ths on the bass side, 6.5 on the treble. So that's pretty tough for a lot of people. I want to make a bridge of similar dimension, so I'll position this one in a place where it's got decent intonation to begin with. Ooh. It's a little bit out, eh? This is some low-tack sign maker's tape. Still want to be kind of careful. This finish, of course, has this characteristic checking pattern all over it, which is both beautiful and kind of risky to be sticking stuff onto, but it is necessary. Looks like its previous position was canted towards the bass side more than it really needed to be. I dialed in the intonation as close as possible using the ABR because I'll use it as a template and take measurements from it when I'm making the new bridge. We'll definitely replace these slightly anachronistic locking Godot tuners with something more period appropriate. Before loosening off the jack, I'll put on this little extending jack with a piece of wire and use that to keep things together because there's bound to be like a lock washer and some other stuff on the jack, which I don't really want to get lost inside the body. So that just keeps things in order when it's down in the depths. I'll loosen and remove the retaining nuts on the potentiometer posts and let those drop into the guitar. I'll remove the screws holding on the tailpiece and also the strap button, and we'll see what's under there. Hopefully it's a grounding wire. And it is. This one has actually been soldered directly to the tailpiece. Usually they're just sitting sort of loose and being clamped to the side to make contact. I'll pull off the pick guard as well. This usually has a little riser block. I'll unscrew the pickup ring and we'll see what we're working with in terms of a pickup here. Why, that's a PAF sticker. Now, if this was a full-size humbucker, oh boy, it'd be worth several $1,000s. Getting the wiring harness out took a little bit of finagling because this has got some of those really interesting potentiometer shielding cases attached. They're quite large, and you have to get them just the right angle to have them come out of the mini bucker route here. Yeah, I don't see these very often. I don't think they were used for all that long. They basically make a little Faraday cage all the way around the pot, basically to shield the tiny little area where the pickup leads are connected. It's debatable whether they're really necessary, especially in the case of a humbucker, but they're kind of cool. I'm just establishing if my Gibson ES335 hole pattern is going to work with the existing holes and where the F-hole is. I think it will. I'm just going to trace the locations so I can drill these holes out. I'm using a Forstner bit and very little downward pressure. I don't want to go blasting through because it could chip the plywood up in terrible ways. So I just kind of work at it, clear the dust, and we'll go back and work at it some more. Got brand new pots from June of 2025. It'll be easy to date. I find it difficult to film and describe the whole electronics thing. The casual viewer would be bored out of their skull, and the people who really need the information probably aren't going to get enough of it from my description. But the main thing is to try and keep everything neat and make sure that the solder has a good chance to warm the parts up, get them good and hot and flow properly so that the connections are good. Here I'm connecting the braided metal insulation shielding around a couple of wires to the back of the volume pot, providing it a ground, or an earth if you're in Europe. On areas where that braided shielding comes sort of close to the hot connections for the pot itself, I'll slip on some heat shrink tubing. When working around delicate things like capacitors, you want to be judicious about the amount of heat used and the duration. And be neat about stuff. Get rid of that little tail, it was annoying me. I'm plotting the position of the switch, the classic Gibson three-way switch. This is the right angle version from Switchcraft for use in narrow bodies. They cost an arm and a leg. Having drilled a hole, I'll make sure that the little insert fits okay, which it seems to do. There we have as neat a package as I can make. Everything in the right place. Lots of shielded cable. Getting this in and out is actually easier than the vintage style, without those great big pot cans. It's still fairly tight fit in terms of thickness, though. The width of these are just under the width of the body cavity. Using the jack on a line to fish the output jack through the hole is an important part of the process. It'd be very difficult to do it otherwise. Having wiggled the switch into the approximate right position and picking it up with some tweezers, I finally got it through the top. And here I'm going to tighten the little retaining ring, protecting the top of the instrument with a piece of paper, using this special little claw device. It looks like the kind of thing that you remove divots from the green on a golf course with. And of course we'll put on the decorative Catalan plastic colored switch tip. I guess Epiphone envisioned only the most sedate kind of players using the Sorrento, people who refused to stand because they didn't provide a strap button on the body. So the main thing, of course, here is to create some kind of support little block that will take up some of the sideways pressure of the screw, not relying on the thickness of the sidewall to hold all of that weight, so I have to glue this in place. Clamp it using this guitar tuner clamp. Now there is a rule that states it can't ever be easy. So we get things like this. The new pickup rings are about 3 millimeters longer than the original one, which means that none of the holes are going to line up, and I have to plug the previous ones. It's at this point I also start to wonder whether this original pickup route is going to work well with the mounting plate of the new ones. Oftentimes I have to modify them slightly to make them fit. I get to saw right into this vintage pick guard. I'll do a neat job though. There's a lot going on here with center lines on the pickup covers and center line of the neck, and the disparity between the sizes of old and new, and trying to get everything to line up properly. I'll take a break from all of that by changing the tuners from one kind of Goto to another. Is it Gato or Goto? Do we care? Anyway, there were no screws in the package, which is just, come on. Pickups have a height, the bridge has a height, the strings have a height. Somehow they all have to get along. There's some computation going on here. Finally, some good old-fashioned woodwork. By making the gross dimensions of the new bridge the same as the old one, it can cut down on a lot of headaches. Here I'm super gluing the old bridge to the new blank with some tape in between, so that I can trace the basic shape of the bottom of the bridge. That can save hours of sanding time. Why glue the parts together? Well, because the top surface of this bridge is so very thin that it's flexible in a way that won't let me trace it. Otherwise, this locks it down for me. Post spacing is very important. The idea being that in the future, if someone wants to come along and replace this wooden bridge with a standard ABR, they could just pop on a Gibson one and it would work. Someone in the future is about to thank me. See? Ah, there we go. Now I'll plane it to width. And also to height. I'm scrub sanding the base of the bridge using the front of the guitar as a template, because remember there's an arch there, and it's not necessarily a uniform arch either, especially in a guitar that's 60 years old. So, the idea is to get a nice shape on there that matches, but under string tension things rarely match. There's usually some weird stuff that happens when the pressure goes on. Anyway, close is generally good enough. Some relief cuts to take up the height found in the adjustment screws. This allows the bridge to be thicker and thereby stiffer. So I'm cutting a Supro / airline style zigzag bridge using the dimensions I took from the individually adjusted saddles for the ABR. Transfer them to the top of the blank here. Start off with a chisel. It's good to make stop cuts for these sort of wedge-shaped devices to break off in. This is another of those activities that seems pretty quick to do, but you know what? In the factory they had a specialized jig to do this with what I imagine was probably like a 1x48 sander or something. Carving them by hand, like this is an hour's worth of work by the time you're done. And it's not so much the carving so much as the measuring and checking to make sure that things are where they're supposed to be. And then of course the sanding and filing and refinement, which is something that a lot of the airline bridges don't really show. They can be kind of rough looking, but I try to make them look smooth and kind of professional. I'm chopping the ends into a radius, which I'll then file and sand. Have to mark out for the string spacing. Just Just make a little nick with a knife and then come back with my nut slotting files and refine that. They don't have to be deep. Just a little nick will do. Now, of course, this has to go in the right place, so I've strung up the outside E's, got those intonated, and then I can mark out for the position. That's right, the adjustment posts are going right down into the top, pinning it in place. Virtually every arch top should have the bridge pinned in place. So many of them are not in the correct place. So I'm epoxying the posts through the bridge base here, and you can see they extend below it. So the second-hand mini buckers and the pickup rings, neither of those came with screws for mounting. And good luck finding an inexpensive and quick way to get those screws. So here I am cutting off some longer, I guess they're P90 mounting screws, so that I can use those instead. I'm trying to ascertain whether I have to route a new hole through the top here for this pickup in the bridge position, and it looks like I have to. I would never be able to set it up with like a normal action, so it's actually got to go below the surface. So the question is, how do you do this quickly, effectively, not too expensively? And I'm here drilling through the top for the portions of the bridge base that hold the screws that run up through the pickup surrounds. Here I'm using a Dremel in a router base to slightly lengthen the aperture so that the pickup will actually fit in there. I have this rule for myself that if ever I cut a hole into an arch top surface, I always add some bracing around the hole to account for the loss of stiffness which can occur. These are Adirondack spruce. They're about 1/2 inch or 13 millimeters wide, and they'll effectively double the thickness in this area. So I made up a routing template, and I'm super gluing it in place here. It's not the most secure connection, but I have a light touch with the router. Next point of annoyance. These pickups were designed to be screwed directly to wood rather than being hung in a pickup ring. Their bases are not threaded for screws, so I have to come up with some way of making them work with screws. Here I'm lightly sanding the bottom of some 440 nuts. So I'm going to epoxy them in place, which might not be the most secure connection. I suppose brazing them would be better, but we're dealing with disparate materials. This is the pragmatic approach. Previous to this, I took some paste wax and waxed the inner circumference of the nuts, making sure the screw threads are not going to get blocked off with the epoxy. I suppose I could chase them afterwards using a tap, but it's not necessary. And there we are. I'm using the surgical tubing rather than a spring. Surgical tubing works well. After about 15 years, though, it gets really dried out and kind of non-functional, so you might have to replace it. Here's something I do frequently. I like to make the connections for the pickups rather than directly at the switch and pots. I leave excess length and do it in such a way that it can be accessible through one of the sound holes in the top. This means that in the future, if someone ever wants to change the pickups, they don't have to tear the whole thing apart and drag out the whole harness again to get to it. They can just do it from the comfort and safety of, the exterior here, and it's much quicker and easier and less expensive. I was all ready to call it a day, but the base side adjustment screw here was digging into my palm in such a way that it was annoying. And I said, I can't have this kind of annoyance in my life. So here I am, lopping it off. I'll follow this up with a file and some sandpaper. All right, the end of another one. I don't know. I've said it before. This kind of mod on the surface seems pretty easy, right? It's usually prefaced with, well, just a quick job for you. Just make it 2 pickups. The amount of work that goes into something like this is difficult to anticipate, for one thing, but also to explain. Like, it's all the little stuff, that the measuring and the remeasuring, all that double checking to make sure that stuff is going to go where it's supposed to, because you only get one shot at cutting it in the right place. Hopefully the person doing the work has been nice and given you a package rate, because the straight hourly on something like this, oh, forget it. I stay away from doing a lot of mods more and more as I get older. My stance is, just buy the guitar you want. There are a lot of different guitars out there. You want a guitar with 2 pickups? They've been making them for a lot of years now. And on a clean vintage example like this, it's debatable if this is value added. A certain kind of collector will immediately go hands off as soon as they hear or see that something was added. So your market pool for value shrinks to players who want to play a single cutaway Epiphone. It's not a Gibson. It's not even a Casino. Who do we know who plays a Sorrento? I couldn't name anyone. So I dug and dug, and I found an interview where Lenny Kravitz said that he used one for a few songs on an early album. So there isn't the kind of fan response driving the value on something like this. Is it a serviceable guitar? Sure thing. It's fully hollow. It's got mini buckers. Each of these line items shrinks the pool of potential buyers even more, right? But at the end of the day, you can make music with it.